is on docket 0367. This, the docket formally is named an order for hearing regarding homeownership assistance, including for first-generation homebuyers. This matter was co-sponsored or was sponsored by Councillor Bach, Councillor Braden, and myself. I'm joined today by Councillor Bach, Councillor Braden, and Councillor Flynn. I have a letter from Councillor Julia Mejia that I'm going to now read into the record, noting her absence. Dear Madam Chair and members of the Committee on Housing and Community Development, I'm writing to inform you of my absence from today's hearing on the Committee on Housing and Community Development regarding docket 0367, order for hearing regarding homeownership assistance, including for first-generation homebuyers. Due to previously scheduled great engagement, I am not able to attend. However, I want to offer my support and thanks to the co-sponsors, Councillors Bach, Councillors Braden, and Councillor Edwards, for voicing this issue in the Council. As the first person in my family to buy a home, this issue is incredibly personal to me. It is crucial that we ensure that housing is accessible to everyone and that equity is at the center of this conversation for people who have systemically been denied homeownership opportunities, which is partially why our office filed a hearing order on reparations alongside Councillor Bach. I look forward to following up on this conversation, and I hope to take part in future dialogues. Sincerely, Julia Mejia, Boston City Councilor at Large. So with that, I'm going to just go through the formalities. This hearing is being recorded and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, FiOS Channel 964, and is live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV. We will also make the public testimony available at the end of the hearing. If you are interested in testifying, please email ron.cobb, that's ron.cobb at boston.gov for the link, and follow along on the live stream to know when it's your turn to speak. Please state your name and affiliation/residence and limit your comments to a few minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. We are here today for a hearing on docket 0367, a hearing regarding home ownership assistance, including first-generation home buyers. Today, we have several invited speakers from the administration as well as from advocates and policy experts. I'm just going to name them all right now. We will have the administration after opening comments from from my colleagues. We will then have the administration speak, and then we will have a round of questions or some comments from my colleagues, and then we will go to the advocates, and then we will have another round. So from the administration, we have Maureen Flynn, Deputy Director of the Boston Home Center, Department of Neighborhood Development, and we also have Karen Rabaza. Yes? Okay. Assistant Director of Home Buying Services from the Boston Home Center, Department of Neighborhood Development. From our advocates and policy experts, we have Simone Crawford, Director of STASH and Homeownership Operations at the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. Clark Ziegler, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. Phil Hellman, and I think Shayak might also be joining us, but I see you. Good to see you. From the Greater Boston, Shayak Chakraborty. If I said that correctly?
Shayak Chakraborty.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Chakraborty is from the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. We have Jeanette Ratcliffe, Associate Vice President for the Housing Finance Policy Center of the Urban Institute. We have Ms. Jo Ann Barber, Executive Director of Charlesview Incorporated, and Ms. Megan Monson, Homeownership and Counseling Manager of Alston Brighton CDC, or Community Development Corporation. So we have, then some people also signed up for public testimony. I see a Jill Konopka from the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, or NACA, Bruce Marks, CEO of the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, and Joshua Wilson, also from NACA. So just want to let everyone know who is here in the Zoom, if you will, to have this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the lead sponsors for some opening remarks, then Councillor Flynn, and then we'll go to the panel. Councillor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councillor Edwards, and thank you everyone for being here. The motive of this hearing is really that we've been doing some pretty exciting stuff in the home ownership space in the city of Boston in the last couple of years, and it's really been driven by a lot of the people we're going to hear from today. And it's something that I was proud to work on before I was a counselor, and I'm really proud to support sort of the budget expansion of since becoming a counselor. But I think that more people need to know about what we're doing on the first time and especially first generation home ownership front in the city of Boston. And, this is an area where we need to amplify the resources because the whole city continues to talk about our racial wealth gap, but home ownership is such a key piece of addressing that. And first generation home ownership is really something that we in Boston are leading the way on, being a way to really target that intervention towards that goal. And I also just think it's such an important piece of the puzzle for keeping our families here in our community. So like I said, something that, some of the folks who we're going to hear from today, I remember when GBIO and MAHA and all were kind of pushing for this expansion just as a conceptual thing and something that the Community Preservation Act might fund someday. And it's very exciting that we've gotten there and hit a bunch of milestones, and that now people all the way in Washington, D.C. are looking at the first generation program that's gotten off the ground here. But I just think all those things are still in their nascent stages. And I know that I share with many of my colleagues on the council the desire to really amplify these programs, and both in terms of people knowing about them, Bostonians knowing they can take advantage of them, and us building on the volume of funding that supports them. So that's really the goal for today. And I'm really grateful to my colleagues, Councillor Edwards, both for co-sponsoring and for chairing today, and all her work on housing, and Councillor Braden. And, Councillor Braden and I, we share in Alston and Mission Hill, the two neighborhoods of the city with the lowest owner occupancy home ownership. And so I know that for both of us as district councillors, it's something very close to our heart to kind of turn that around. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Braden.
Thank you. I'm really delighted and excited to be part of this conversation this afternoon. I want to echo my colleagues' remarks. Home ownership and first generation home ownership is so essential to building generational wealth and also stabilizing our communities, especially out here in Alston Brighton. We have, under 10% in Alston and hovering around 20% of owner occupancy in Brighton. And I think that is detrimental to the stability and the civic life of our communities. It's really important that people have an opportunity to invest and have a home in a neighborhood and be really there and invested in it. And I'm really excited about the opportunity and the great work that MAHA has been doing to try and, especially immigrant families and folks who haven't had an opportunity to own a home before. It's really important. And I'm delighted to see my friends from the Alston Brighton CDC and Joanne Barber from Charlesview. The CDC, 25 years ago, I took my first time homeowners class with the CDC, and my partner and I bought a home in the neighbourhood a long time ago, and they're doing great work. The challenge for us out in Alston Brighton is to actually have homes that are affordable for folks to buy. So that's the other side of the equation. So we'll look forward to the conversation this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Just very briefly on my end, this conversation is a matter of not just housing justice, but racial justice. And making sure that as long as homeownership is linked to generational wealth, if we are not creating more pipelines for more people of color, for younger people to have access to that, then we're cutting off generations to follow from accumulating wealth that is very necessary, not just for their future, but honestly for them to be able to pass down. I think this is also a moment where we need to be pulling in all the institutions that are funding our homeownership, and not so much holding them accountable, but really making sure the programs that they have are reaching the people who need them, and are funded. And we as a city need to speak with a moral compass. I believe that home ownership is a way of preventing displacement. It's a way of making sure that people are invested continually in the communities that they hopefully can grow up in and stay as long as they want to. So this is a matter of stabilizing our neighborhoods. It's a matter of racial justice. It's a matter of also bringing banking institutions and the government together for that, what we often say, public-private partnership, to get things done. So I'm very excited about the people who are here, the activists. I met many of them in so many different ways. And I still have my pie dish from Expand the Pie, where we discussed about the incredible goal of getting 1,000 new homeowners in 5 years in the city of Boston. So these are things that we need to continue to fight for. I'm going to now turn it over to Councillor Flynn, and then we'll go to the administration.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and Councillor Bach and Councillor Braden for your important work on this issue, and the city officials that are here from D&D. Thank you for your important work as well and leadership on this, and the activists that have been in the neighborhoods for many years, connecting residents with homes is incredible work that you're also doing. So I want to say thank you to you and your teams back in the neighborhoods. Like Councillor Braden mentioned, and as Councillor Edwards and Bach also highlighted, the first time homeowners program, they're critical for residents. But what I want to make sure is that residents that traditionally have not heard of these types of programs, maybe immigrants or residents that might not speak English or residents in BHA, maybe. We want to make sure that every resident has the opportunity to participate in such a program and knows about the program. Councillor Edwards mentioned it's about racial justice, and I agree. We want to make sure that our immigrant neighbors also have the same opportunities and chances that we have as well. And I think it's also important for the city administration to use the bully pulpit to call out banks as well, to make sure our banking community is doing the right thing for residents of Boston, whether it's charging the correct interest rate or making sure our banks work with residents in a professional and ethical way as well. That's also important. So I know D&D does do that, but I want to make sure our banking and developers are also being upfront, honest, and helpful to the residents of the city. That's my opening statement. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And I also have the bowl from Maha, and I'm proud to have received that bowl as well. And I always use it at Thanksgiving. I put our some of our turkey in there. So it's a great reminder of the home ownership possibilities for so many in this city. So I want to say thank you to Maha for excellent work as well.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Flynn. So at this point, unless we've been joined by another councillor, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to the administrative panel. Maureen?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Edwards and members of the council. My name is Maureen Flynn, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Boston Home Center, the homeownership division of the Department of Neighborhood Development. Here with me today is Karen Rabaza, the Assistant Director for Home Buying Services with the Boston Home Center. I have some brief remarks focused on providing information regarding our current home buying and home ownership programs, specifically those listed in the hearing order. And then Karen will be providing some more detailed demographic information on the participants served by our programs. So the Boston Home Center operates several programs with the goal of increasing homeownership rates in the city of Boston for low and moderate income households and households of color. The programs at the Boston Home Center operates help individuals. So we assist buyers. But D&D also, as an agency, assists home buyers by helping to produce affordable homeownership units through our regular NHD housing production programs, including NHI, which you're all familiar with. So as an agency, we're helping both the demand side, helping buyers, and the supply side, producing affordable homeownership units. The programs that Boston Home Center offers buyers can be broken down into three categories: financial aid programs, TA, or assisting buyers to buy sponsored affordable housing units, including resales, and then education and counseling services. We provide funding for our partner agencies like Maha and Alston Brighton CDC to train individuals to buy and keep their homes. Last year, we had almost 2,000 graduates of our homebuyer educational programs. So I think that might be a record, but that was clearly more than in recent years. And we attribute that to a good thing about virtual classes, which is that more people could participate in them. They didn't have to rush home from work and go to an in-person class, but they could participate virtually. Of those 2,000 graduates, over 1,300 were people of color. We've also expanded our educational programs to include classes on cooperatives and how to deal with household maintenance and upkeep for new households, new heads of households. So for example, if a partner dies or there's a divorce, sometimes people are thrust into the role of head of household, not having taken care of the house in the past. And so we offer classes through courses through MAHA on that for that situation. We also market, income certify, and help buyers reserve units for our NHI and NHD sponsored new construction units. In addition, we assist owners of deed restricted properties sell their units, and we certify buyers for deed restricted resale units. Over the past 5 years, since FY17, D&D has helped produce 250 affordable homeownership units. And in FY21, despite the pandemic, we produced 33 units of homeownership, so 33 homeownership units. Many of those buyers who went into affordable units also received our financial assistance. City funds supported all D&D homeownership units that were produced because we were the only funding source because the state hadn't funded homeownership for a while. With the state's new Commonwealth Builder Program, we're hopeful that we can produce more units of homeownership now. And we're really excited about receiving the ARPA funds and what that could mean for homeownership unit production as well. So we're really hoping to increase the units produced over the next 5 years. Lastly, and probably most importantly, the Boston Home Center provides financial assistance to home buyers. In 2017, D&D convened what we call the Barriers to Homeownership Working Group, consisting of a racially diverse group of lenders, realtors, advocates, and quasi-public agency officials, many of whom are on this meeting. So it included GBIO, MAHA, MHP, Mass Housing, realtors, and I think 3 or 4 banks who ended up participating with us over the long haul. The purpose of the group was to build on D&D's decades-long work on racial equity and to increase home ownership rates by identifying and then developing creative solutions to the barriers faced by priority demographic groups. So our priorities were low and moderate income households, households of color, new immigrants to Boston, and individuals who would be first-generation buyers and their families. Through that working group, we identified 4 main barriers to homeownership for those groups. And this is, I think, important because as we talk about equity and what that means, it doesn't mean providing one slot solution for everybody. It means tailoring solutions to meet folks where they are. So we weren't talking about coming up with one solution for everybody. We wanted to figure out what were the barriers that people faced and then tailor the solutions to those barriers. So the first barrier that was identified, and I know no one's going to be surprised about this, but was the high prices in Boston to purchase a home. So that's not a surprise. That didn't take a lot of research. That is what it is. The second issue that a lot of folks faced was low credit scores and making it difficult for buyers to qualify for the really excellent products that MHP and that Mass Housing offer. And I'm really excited that the Urban Institute is part of the meeting because they've done great work on credit. The third barrier that came to the fore was large student debt loads that prevented buyers from qualifying for mortgage products because of their debt to income ratios, even before adding a mortgage to the mix. So it wasn't necessarily that buyers with student debt couldn't afford to amass a down payment, although that sometimes is an issue, but it was their debt to income ratio that was really the barrier to them getting into homeownership. because monthly student debt was so high that lenders use a certain underwriting formula and say, if you add a mortgage onto this, we don't think that buyer is necessarily a good bet for us. Yet the buyers were paying probably more than they would for a mortgage in rent payments. So on paper, it looked like they could afford to own a home. The fourth issue was the lack of down payment for buyers that couldn't rely on family or friends for a down payment because they were the first to own in their families. So that was a problem for folks. They just couldn't amass those funds. So over the last 4 years, since 2017, the Boston Home Center, together with those partners I mentioned, have changed and created new programs to address each one of those barriers. First, in conjunction with the group, we decided to create the One Plus Boston program, which was a combination, as you probably all know by now, because you've heard this probably a million times, but a reduced interest rate combined with enhanced down payment. So we looked at, and the folks on this call can tell you probably 100 different models, and we determined that the thing that would give folks the most purchasing power was reducing the interest rate as low as we could go and giving them enhanced down payment assistance. So that program is available to folks that currently live in Boston and that are 100% AMI or less. So that's a great program, and Karen's going to talk a little bit more about the demographics of the success of that program. We also decided to change our regular down payment assistance program. We went from providing about an average of $10,000 per buyer to now up to $40,000 per buyer, depending on the type of home that they are buying. We also changed it up so that buyers know what to expect. So know up to what they qualify for with us before they go looking for a home, not after the fact. So we're no longer gap financing. We're in the deal right in the beginning, and we're with One Plus and our regular program, and we're training realtors too to understand what that means. That a buyer is going to essentially have two pre-approvals, one from their main lender and then one from us, telling the seller and everybody else what the buyer can afford. So one of the questions that I think was asked of us was, are our buyers being sustained in their homes? So are they able to sustain home ownership? We think we've had pretty good success on this. Over the last 5 years, there have been less than 10 homeowners that have been foreclosed on who have received financial assistance from us, and probably 2 that have been foreclosed on who have been in deed restricted properties. So we have a very good track record of sustaining those home ownership, those homes for folks as well. And as you know, we offer a variety of home ownership programs and products for folks that own, and they can get that assistance in addition to the down payment assistance from us. Secondly, we partnered with Mass Affordable Housing Alliance, MAHA, to support their first generation, or their what they call their STASH program, and expand availability to Boston residents. Using some of the funds that D&D received from the police overtime budget, we provided MAHA with the funds to give first generation buyers a 2-to-1 match. So if buyers could save $2,500, they would get $5,000 through the city program from MAHA in a grant. So they'd be walking out the door from the program with at least $7,500 to pay for closing costs or down payment. We've decided to expand that program for this year, and we intend also to use some ARPA money that was just approved by the council to expand the program so that more Boston buyers can take advantage of that program. Last, we are working with our nonprofit partners like Urban Edge and with the Mayor's Office of Economic Mobility to create new programs for buyers with lower credit scores and buyers with significant student loan debt. The mayor's office will also be holding a public meeting soon to take feedback on some of the public's ideas for closing the racial wealth gap by supporting homeownership with ARPA funds. So we're looking forward to hearing from the community their ideas for supporting more homeownership and figuring out ways to create solutions for different subsets of buyers. And like I said, understanding where people are and getting them past the goal line into homeownership. So I'm going to stop there, and Karen is going to provide you with some answers to some of the demographic questions that you had. And I believe there's a presentation if someone might be able to pull that up, or I can pull it up, however that works. There's some slides to go with her presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Woman Edwards and members of the council. This is the first time I'm providing testimony for a council hearing, and I'm excited to tell you about the success we have had with our homeownership programs. This really means a lot to me, not only because I'm an immigrant, but I have been in this industry and there is a need and there is a help. And I'm so happy to be part of such a social change into our city and community. So let me know when you're ready to present, Maureen, so I can start showing the slides.
Do I present, or is that somebody else that presents? I'll do it if I'm supposed to.
Okay.
I think if you guys can share the slides.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Sorry, one sec. Karen, do you want to just start and I'll find
Yes.
the presentation? Sorry.
Okay, so the first talk was about one of the slides, and which shows the total and demographics of buyers who have participated in the One Plus Boston program in our HAP program, formerly known as FAP. Last year, we had about 63 buyers that bought their first home through the One Plus Boston program, and 25 buyers purchased through the Improved HAP program. 70% of those were household of color in both programs. As you can see in the chart, shows the reach of the program, which over 45% who purchased with the One Plus Boston earned below 80% of the AMI. So it shows for each program, it shows the ethnicity, the race, that it shows that we're helping at least 70% of the households of color. It also shows all the cities in the neighborhoods that our homeowners are actually investing into. We're reaching buyers that we are not able to help before. For example, we had a single mom this year who had a Section 8 certificate, and she just recently closed on her new home with the One Plus Boston program. And even now during the pandemic, buyers took our classes in record numbers, and we closed more loans last year than the previous fiscal years. In addition, our support for the first generation program, it's enabling more buyers of color to buy in Boston. We provided funding this past fiscal year for 50 buyers to enroll in the program. 24% are Latin and 70% are Black. Overall, the program, most participants are under the age of 40 years old. Approximately 40% are female heads of households and 38% are immigrant. 7 of the 50 buyers have purchased their home in the past year. We market our home ownership programs in several ways. We, of course, use social media and attend virtual meetings, but we also present at every homebuyer course we financially support. That means that staff are attending courses at night and on the weekends to promote our programs. And we're not presenting our information in Spanish at classes sponsored through NOAA and MAHA. Y ahora estamos presentando la información de nuestros programas en español en clases patrocinadas a través de NOAA y MAHA. We also adapted to the pandemic by holding our home buyer and homeowner expo over Zoom, and we had such a great turnaround. We had over 200 registered for our home buyer session and over 200 registered for our homeowner session. And even though we had such a great weather, that was not an impediment. Everyone attended. It was such a great success in our new way of doing our Zoom expo. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much for the excellent presentation, Karen. And thank you also, Maureen, as well. It's inspiring. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off from the two lead sponsors, and I'll follow up, and then Councillor Flynn, if we have any questions. Thank you again for your incredible hard work and representing East Boston very well, too.
Yes, thank you.
I get this. I'm a little biased. It's awesome. Good job, Karen. All right, Councillor Bach, and then Councillor Brayton, and myself, and then Councillor Flynn.
I wondered, you sort of touched on this, and thank you so much for taking so many of our questions that we sent ahead and really giving us data on that. I wondered if we could land a little bit more on sort of that point about how we've gone in sort of One Boston to One Plus Boston in terms of like who we're able to serve. And then maybe we should leave this for Simone and Maha to talk about the first gen and kind of how that's the next step in inclusivity. But I don't know if you guys I wanted to make sure that we amplified that point a little bit.
Sure. And I'm glad that Simone is here to talk about first gen or stash. In terms of One versus One Plus, so One, as you guys know, is a statewide program that MHP offers. And it's a mortgage program that offers a reduced interest rate that Clark, I'm sure we'll talk about later. And it's a good program because buyers don't have to pay PMI, right? So private mortgage insurance. So that allows them to put more of their money towards the main mortgage payment and afford more house. So MHP's interest rate is already low to begin with. And the credit score to get into a One mortgage is probably one of the lowest credit scores of a good, affordable product in Massachusetts, right? So we took the One mortgage as a basis for One Plus. And we, with MHP's help, so they offered to partner with us on One Plus Boston. So we took that low interest rate to begin with, and then used CPA funds to reduce the interest rate even lower. So for buyers that earn between 80 and 100% AMI, they get a full half point interest rate off of MHP's already reduced interest rate. And for buyers that earn below 80% MHI, it's a full percentage point off of the One current interest rate. So that knocks the interest rate really low. And when we were working with our lenders, which also deserve a lot of credit, the One Plus Boston lenders, the three that started with us, they really stretched, right? And they decided that they were going to come along with us and do this with us. And we couldn't be more appreciative because the program wouldn't have happened without them. So Boston Private, Santander, and Cambridge Trust were our first three lenders. We've doubled that number to 6, but we started with them and they deserve a lot of credit. So someone gets a reduced interest rate and there's a cash cost to that, to giving someone a reduction in the interest rate. We use CPA funds and we provide funding directly to MHP for that cash amount that it costs. Let's say it's costs $15,000, let's say, to reduce someone's interest rate from a 3% to 2.5%. I'm just making that up. So we additionally provide the buyer with more down payment assistance than we used to. So they are eligible to receive more down payment assistance on top of the reduced interest rate. And that's, again, what makes this program that much more powerful. So that's it's kind of like the one program on steroids in a way. That's how we started to describe it when we were developing it. But it works because it has those two components. It wouldn't work as well if it just had a reduced interest rate, but it works really well because it has a reduced interest rate plus enhanced down payment assistance. We, again, award down payment assistance based on need. So we tell folks what they're eligible for up to an amount, and they're walking out the door with a pre-approval letter from us. If they happen to buy a property that's worth less, then we may reduce the interest, not the interest rate, but the down payment assistance portion of it to match what they're buying. But yeah, so that, I don't know if that's too long of an explanation, but that's how we got from 1 to 1+. Because we're using CPA funds, CPA funds are only, it's a good match because the one product, folks at 100% AMI are eligible for the one product, and because we're using CPA funds, which are eligible for folks 100% AMI and below, perfect match. So that's who is eligible to receive the 1+ program.
Great. And Maureen, do we have any sense of a blended cost of like per family who for getting them to 1+ instead of 1, what that's costing us?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So on average, we're going to say by awards, it's about an average of $39,000 to $40,000 per household. So that's what it's costing between the interest write down and the enhanced down payment assistance together.
Great, thank you so much. And Madam Chair, we've got so many great panelists on, so I'll stop my questions there for now.
Thank you. Councilor Braden?
Liz, you're muted.
Always talking to myself. It's not a good thing. Let's see. In terms of, the average cost of the homes that your folks are able to buy with this wonderful product, can you give me some ballpark? Just some ballpark figures about what
the average. Karen, do we have that on the spreadsheet? If we don't, we can get it back to you. Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but off the top of my head, I'm going to say that the average is around maybe 400, 450. Is that a rough? Yeah.
Yep. But we can get you that information.
That's good. And I also noticed on your data that a lot of the units are studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and there was one 3-bedroom. I know the cost of housing is astronomical. Is there anything that we can do to? What are the barriers to the larger homes being available, the family-size homes for a bigger family? What are your challenges around that issue?
I think you already said it. It's the supply, what's available in terms of larger homes that are in the price point for folks that live in the city. Some of the deed restricted homes that we're building, some of the affordable homes that we're building have a larger bedroom count number. I will say with 1+ in particular, I think we're skewing a little bit to a younger buyer. And because we have a lot of buyers that say, I've been waiting for so long. Thank goodness for this program. I've been looking for years, but we also have buyers that didn't think that they could buy in the first place and are getting in and buying more condos than we thought with the 1+ program. So I think it skews a little bit to the younger buyer, but I think the problem with finding, family size homes is, again, it's a supply issue. There's not that much inventory in Boston left of larger homes.
I think, well, my experience of when I took the home buying course 25 years ago, the great advice at the time was to try and buy a 2-family so that you could,
Right.
you could live in one unit with your family and you could rent out the other unit to help pay with your mortgage. But then we saw an increase in speculative investment, and all those 2-family homes are being bought up by outside investors. So
Right.
that's the challenge we're up against. But anyway, thank you. I'm very excited about all this great work, and I look forward to hearing the other presenters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will keep my questions just to make sure I understand in terms of the increase of participation in pipeline, because I think that is what I'm most excited about. You may have gone through the year-over-year increases. I think you said last year we had a record-breaking number of folks in the course.
In the education course, we had almost 2,000. We usually have about 1,600.
Right, that's excellent. So,
yeah.
And do you think that had a lot to do with the digital infrastructure that allowed for more people to participate?
Absolutely, and I think probably Simone and Megan probably would echo that. But yes, the availability of online courses, I think, and what we've seen is it really increased participation a lot. And I know probably both Maha and ABCDC can talk about that.
Wonderful. And we will. I will let them then talk about that. I was curious because I'm beyond excited about that. I also I'm very encouraged by the language access and equity that Karen discussed in her testimony. You said it was the first time we were offering some of these courses in Spanish, or?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We just recently had another one with Maha, and it was such a great success. And our plans is to increase that. We have a staff member that now speaks Haitian Creole, and we're really looking to that will be the next.
Excellent. And I'm sure that I would just encourage, because we're also discussing language access as a whole city and ordinance and updating it, looking at ASL, of course, American Sign Language. And I think our new ordinance, just as an FYI, is going to set some standards after population numbers, depending on the communities and whatnot. But this is beyond exciting that the amount of access points is actually increased during a pandemic, where we learned that housing was so key to keeping people safe. We would tell people to stay in their homes, but a lot of them then couldn't work and then couldn't pay rent, or a lot of people didn't have homes to go to. So we just learned so much in this, and I'm so happy to see the increase in the amount of people who are able to access these services. What would you say in terms of the cooperative development, which is what I'm really excited about too? I'm glad I remember we discussed this when I was at OHS, Maureen, about pipelining in and getting TA assistance for helping to form housing co-ops or to maintain them. Has there been an increase in that? And talk to me about how we're going to, like, the funding. I think one of the biggest gaps we had was local banks and other financial institutions helping to lend or fund cooperatives.
So just to go back to the our programs in other languages, I just wanted to let folks know. So we hired 4 staff members, I would say, within the last month, right, Karen? And 3 of them are bilingual. So it was a conscious effort on our part, and that is really important to us with new staff, to bring on staff whenever possible that are bilingual. So, and now we have added Haitian Creole to our toolkit, so that's great. All of our applications are translated into 10 languages. All of our fact sheets, guidelines, everything that we basically interface with the public on are translated into 10 languages. We also had our translation interpretation services available on for our expos, and ASL was available as well, and it was used in our home buyer classes. So that was great. So in terms of co-ops, and I know this is something that Councilor Bach is near and dear to her heart as well. So we had a train the trainer session with our homebuyer ed providers to learn about co-ops that a local co-op advocate developed. So now our homebuyer education providers are able to teach and incorporate into the Homebuyer 101 classes information on co-ops. We are also going to have a separate module, like a mini module on co-ops as well, coming up in this fiscal year. So in our conversations around co-ops, we have learned that there's one national bank that, in addition to providing I forget what the term is. I know you guys know it. The bulk mortgage that goes on to the co-op. They also do individual share loans. So we're really excited. I don't think they've really done work in Boston, but we're really interested to see if we can incentivize some purchasing with that bank. Last, we signed an agreement with SART, the Symphony Area Renaissance Trust, I think it was called, and they are going to do on our behalf with some money that they were going to pay us back. So instead, we granted it back to them to do like a down payment assistance program for co-op purchases in Boston. So we're really excited about that, and they just got going. So we're waiting to hear how if the combination of us telling more people about how co-ops operate gives people an incentive to actually use a down payment program to buy in the city. So we're really excited about that.
So thank you so much. I know one of our panelists may have to leave in the next panel. So I think Councilor Flynn might check in again. He had a conflict. But so what we're going to do, if it's okay with the co-sponsors, we're going to go ahead and go to the advocates panel. And I think it was Bill. Bill, did you have to leave by 4:30? You're muted, Phil.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I do.
Okay. If it's okay with folks, we'll just let Phil go ahead and speak. And then we'll go through the entire advocate panel and then again do a round of questions from the counselors and to the advocates after you speak. If you have any burning questions for the administration, feel free in your comments to say that. After that, I will go to public testimony. I do know some people are patiently waiting to speak. So go ahead, Phil.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Phil Hillman. I'm from St. Paul AME Church in Cambridge. I'm on the housing team at GBIO. And I'm also a board member and former board chair of Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation. The Greater Boston Interfaith Organization is made up of 65 churches, mosques, synagogues, unions, and other institutions who come together to build people power and fight for change in Boston. Our focus issues come from listening to the people who worship in our pews. We focus on leadership development and empowering volunteer community leaders to address concrete issues that affect everyday people. Now, I just want to say we appreciate Councilor Edwards, Councilor Bach, and Councilor Brereton for holding this hearing. A special shout out for Councilor Bach, who's worked with GBIO in the past on housing as a leader at Trinity Church. Now, the need for assistance for the first generation home buyers, we've already talked about that and brought that up. I just want to say at my church, which is in Cambridge, it's a constant conversation among millennials about, I lived here, I grew up here, I went to grammar school here, high school here. I cannot afford to live here. And it's, and it's like, I wish there were a way I could stay in Cambridge as an example of some of the difficulty people see in having this dream of home ownership. Now, GBIO has done some past work in housing, and we do have a long record of working on housing. In 2015, we worked with MAHA and other allies to secure millions of dollars for the 1+ mortgage program. which is incredibly important investment in the first generation home buyers to stay in this city. However, that's a first step only. Next, during the months of April and May of this year, we conducted a listening campaign across our 65 institutions, where we heard over 1,500 recorded stories from 1,500 people across Greater Boston. Now, we asked folks to answer a very simple question. What keeps you up at night? What are your top concerns in the community? People are feeling economically squeezed and angry at racial injustice, yet they love this city and want to keep it affordable for us all. Housing and home ownership were the top concerns that surfaced out of these listening sessions. Let me give you a flavor of some of the stories we heard from people during this listening session. A leader from the Hyde Park Presbyterian shared that she grew up in Hyde Park, went to the same dentist, ice cream shop, and savings bank since she was a child. She desperately wanted to stay near her family, but despite the fact that both she and her husband worked full time, the only house she could afford was below $400,000. The only house was a broken fixer-upper with massive holes in the floor. She ultimately had to move to Brockton to buy a home for her family. We had a leader from the Islamic Society of the Boston Cultural Center in Roxbury, and she shared that her working-class Somali immigrant community is barely holding on to their rental housing. That given the way the area around Jeep Jones Park has gentrified so quickly, they are afraid that they will be out of Boston within 2 years if they don't get an opportunity to buy a home soon. And the leader from the Union Methodist Church in Boston, a professor at Northeastern University, have been temporarily homeless due to high rent and knows many of her colleagues who live in roommates who are well in their 50s, and slowly but surely losing this dream of owning a home one day in her life. These are working people. These are taxpayers, nurses, teachers, retail workers, restaurant owners, bus drivers, trying to keep their head above water and stay in the city they love, but are being denied that opportunity. So what must we do? At GBIO, we are going to take action on this affordable housing issue. We know that we need dramatically more investment in programs like One Plus Boston and other city programs that allow for home ownership and wealth building for working and people of color Bostonians. Federal money coming in. Massive amount of that should be going to just these priorities so we can take this chance to build the city to greater than it was. For us, this is the issue, and for us, the time to act is now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Phil. Councilor Edwards?
Sorry, yeah, my Zoom wasn't coming back. Thank you so much, Phil. I'm gonna move on to Simone Crawford, Director of Stash.
Thank you, Councilors Bach, Edwards, Bearden, and the rest of the council that's here. My name is Simone Crawford, and I am the Director of Stash and Homeownership Operations at MAHA, the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. And STASH is an acronym that stands for Saving Towards Affordable, Sustainable Homeownership. And just to be clear, as Maureen pointed out, Boston First Gen is a part of STASH. I wanted to talk a little bit first about the fact that One Plus Boston, STASH, and the city's down payment and closing cost assistance program all provide critical assistance with both the initial cost and the ongoing monthly cost of homeownership in an otherwise unaffordable city. It was recently pointed out in this conversation that the city has been doing a lot, but no state funding has been coming in to help to really propel what they have been doing or to help to augment what they've been doing. We have all proven track records of reaching over 70% home buyers of color in these programs, and thus we help to shrink the homeownership and wealth gaps in Boston. With that said, we know the data points to the fact that 70% of home ownership goes to the white household as opposed to 35% for Blacks, Latinx, and Asian combined. That's a 2-to-1 match that we really, really need to shrink. We should invest in dramatically increasing the number of home buyers we can serve through these programs each year. In addition, on the demand side, there are programs that need to help low to moderate income renters enter the homeownership market and must be coupled with a substantial investment in expanding the affordable housing stock. Our home buyers are facing a market where there are upwards of 10 offers and many properties. And I can say this, that I've heard firsthand. One of my stash participants that purchased 2 months ago, after being turned down for literally 10 offers. On the 11th one, she had to offer $60,000 over asking. She had to write a letter and send pictures with a detailed depiction of how this homeownership opportunity could benefit her family in order to beat out speculators with cash offers. So there are competitive pressures that are forcing some to forego homeownership and mortgage contingencies, such as home inspections. They're putting down both down payment and savings and their long-term tenure in the homes at risk when we teach them in the classes, them meaning our class graduates, to make sure that they protect themselves and their investment by, doing inspection on their homes and, making sure they have an attorney and all those things. But in order to really be competitive in this market, they have to waive all of those rights. So we simply must provide homes at prices our One Plus Boston and Stash participants can afford if we wish to address racial inequities in stability and wealth and stem the displacement crisis in our Black and Latinx and Asian communities. I want to talk a little bit about the questions that we were asked earlier. I want to give you some demographic information for participants of this program. Now, this program is pretty young. It's still considered a pilot. We started in April of 2019. And if we take into consideration the fact that each participant must complete an 8-month, 1-hour session of, asset bill management, credit, financial stability, goal setting, and all of that stuff, we know that this program is pretty young. But so far, we have enrolled approximately 200 participants. We have 97% people of color. It broke out into 72.5% Blacks, 19% Latinx, 4.5% multiracial, 3% white, and 1% Asian. We have participants age 66% are 40 or under. So we're, again, leaning towards a younger family that are just building their new family. We have 59% children under the age of 18 and 40% female head of household. We have 82% of our participants are female. We have a strong female contingent, and they are really, really very much committed to being homeowners. 38% lives in Dorchester, 12% in Hyde Park, 9% in Mattapan, and 9% in Roxbury. That's 4 out of the 5 Boston neighborhoods where households of color are a majority. In all, 90% are Boston residents, and 38% are immigrants. That means they were born outside of the country. So another question that was asked is, what is the type and location of the housing stock purchased by each program participants? While this is a new program, we have successes despite the current market where successful participants have purchased condominium, single family, and even multifamily homes, and they are inclusive in all across the city of Boston, from Hyde Park to Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan. So we are very conscious of the fact that this program is working. The bank of mom and dad is something that comes, very easy for one demographic or race, as opposed to less for people of color. The question is asked, is homeownership being sustained after households are provided assistance? And this is a great question. These are relatively new homeowners, as the first purchase happened late 2019. The most recent purchase occurred last month. All new homeowners went through a complete 8 monthly sessions training on asset management, budgeting, credit training, and financial wellness to prepare the participants as to how to keep the home once they have achieved their goal of homeownership. And so, as we're very proud to say, all participants are still in their home, sustaining their home, because they've been prepared to undertake this very important aspect of their life. Now it asks how many current renters in Boston are eligible for each program, yet have not participated thus far. For us, what I can say is the demand for homeownership is great, and it keeps increasing each year. And to put things into perspective, just for MAHA alone, as we know, MAHA is not the only first-time homebuyer education provider in the city, but in 2018, we graduated a little over 800 first-time homebuyer. In 2019, we graduated 1,700. Last year, we graduated over 2,400, and we have a potential to graduate closer to 3,000 by the end of this year. This shows that the demand is here. This is just from one provider. So what I can say is we have a demand, we need the supply. We are very accessible. STASH is a pilot program, so funding for matches and for administrative costs is a barrier, but it's something that we've been working on, and thanks to the City of Boston for their investment into this program that has allowed us to expand the programs thus far. The City of Boston contracted with MAHA to provide first-time homebuyer training for its residents. STASH is advertised in all of MAHA first-time homebuyers classes, all of the post-purchase classes as well. We have approximately 26 classes per year, and just to add to what is being said as it relates to the availability of the class as we move to online platform. In person, we used to have our education, a beautiful education space, maybe accommodate about 50 participants for each class. Online, we had to put a cap of 150 per class. So we're triple the amount of people that can take our classes at any point in time. We advertise on the CHAPA website, we advertise on MAHA's website, and on DND's website as well. We also use social media a lot to bring awareness to the programs that are available. And we use several different media outlets as we talk about STASH and try to scale STASH. We're still in a growing period, and funding is a major constraint. And so I really appreciate this time to amplify and to really educate people around the program that we're doing about the race-conscious aspect of it. And hopefully we are able to, bring this to more of the masses in Boston. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Clark Ziegler, Jeanette Ratcliffe, Ms. Joanne Barber, Ms. Megan Monson, and Bruce Marks still to speak just on the panel. So for the panelists coming afterwards, just a matter of maybe limiting comments to about 5 minutes so that we can get through them. Plus, we do have public testimony. I want to acknowledge that Councillor Nisa Sabi-George has also joined us for today's conversation. Clark Ziegler.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards and members of the committee for the invitation to be with you today. I think most of you are familiar with MHP and our background, so I won't spend any time on that. Just create a little context for the conversation leading up to One Plus Boston. I think folks generally know that we're a quasi-public state agency created in 1985 to bring banks to the table to address unmet housing needs of the Commonwealth. And early on, the soft second program, which has now evolved into the One Mortgage program, was created after the Federal Reserve Bank report in 1989 that found racial discrimination in mortgage lending that above and beyond any legitimate underwriting criteria. And the program was designed from the get-go as a race-conscious program. It was developed in partnership with MAHA, other community organizations, the City of Boston, the 4 major Boston banks at the time, none of which are still around, I might add. Today we have, through the program, financed 23,000 plus home purchases across the Commonwealth. We're 4 loans shy of 6,000 loans in the City of Boston. And those loans have performed. Maureen did a great job talking about the benefits of the program, so she did a better job pitching the program than I ever could. We're particularly proud that statewide, we have consistently served more than half households of color in the program. In the City of Boston, it has consistently been higher than that. And the loans have performed as well or better than prime mortgage loans in terms of both delinquencies and foreclosure rates. So it's a great success story. And it was a particularly strong program in Boston. Until 5 or 10 years ago, the volume in Boston really started to drop off. And that was related directly to the gap between incomes and purchase prices. And the lack of, and there's been a lot of people today talking about the lack of affordable stock that's available. That really has been a critical problem in terms of our ability to help folks in Boston, particularly existing residents and people of color, stay in the city and become homeowners. And that was really the motivation behind the discussions that led to One Plus Boston. To address a few of the questions that were put to us by the committee, and I have to say the demographics from DND were terrific. We'll also, we have our own demographics, I think, hopefully match your data, the data at DND. We're happy to share that with the committee. But I would add a couple things. One is just to recognize this has been a heavy lift for participating lenders. Just to mention them all by name, Cambridge Trust, Citizens Bank, City of Boston Credit Union, Santander, and Silicon Valley Bank, formerly Boston Private Bank, and most recently the Cooperative Bank. Also, a pretty big shout out to Santander, which has originated half of the closed One Plus Boston loans. I think in terms of other demographics and other characteristics of the program, one of the frustrations that we had, honestly, in terms of the declining volume for our regular One Mortgage product in Boston, lost my thought. Hold on just a second. I'll come back to that. In terms of property type, we're seeing about, regained my thought. One of the other big issues for us has been the distinction between subsidized deed-restricted affordable units and market rate units. Obviously, the creation of affordable homeownership units in Boston is a critical need. There's always more need for resources and more opportunity to do more. We saw an increasing share of our One Mortgage loans in Boston in deed-restricted units because there was simply nothing on the market available that folks could buy with their current incomes. With One Plus Boston, we've seen a pretty substantial shift, but we'd love to see more. 62% of the loans closed to date have been in market properties. The rest have been in deed-restricted units. We would love to see a higher numbers overall, but particularly higher numbers in private market rate units. The other thing is 59% have been condo units, and there was a question earlier about bedrooms and larger, family properties. Single-family homes are an ideal for a lot of people if that's possible. The market makes that extremely difficult at current prices. And again, I think we'd love to see a situation where we can do something on the supply side that increases the share of single-family purchases. We've had a relatively small number of 2- and 3-family purchases, although the program makes that possible. And that has also been a great opportunity for folks with lower incomes to become homeowners and build wealth. And we've had a historically great success with 2s and 3s in the city of Boston, particularly for households of color, trying to build generational wealth. The last thing I would mention, I have to make a pitch for the governor's proposal to dedicate $1 billion in ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds for homeownership, of which $300 million would be specifically to expand mortgage options for communities and populations that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. That certainly includes Boston and many Boston neighborhoods. Maha immediately, I think, proposed the $1 billion become $1.5 billion, and that would be great too. But I think it's really important we have resources available to the Commonwealth now that can expand successful initiatives like One Plus Boston. The legislature has not yet acted on the governor's recommendation. I think that will resume in September, but I think support from all of you would be really helpful in ensuring that a significant share of those federal ARPA funds are available for programs like One Plus Boston. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Jeanette, is Jeanette on? Yes, Jeanette Radcliffe.
That's right. Hello, Chair Edwards and counselors of the Committee on Housing and Community Development. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm Yannicka Radcliffe, Assistant Vice President of the Urban Institute's Housing Finance Policy Center. I do need to say the views I express here today are my own and should not be attributed to the Urban Institute, its board, or funders. So, as we all know here well, homeownership brings many benefits. Homeowners are more civically engaged, experience better mental and physical health, and have a greater sense of control over their lives. Financially, they lock in most of their long-term housing costs with a fixed rate loan, and with each monthly payment, they build more equity. Even with modest depreciation, and investment in the home can easily beat the return from putting the down payment into the stock market instead. These facts together make homeownership the cornerstone of wealth in the U.S., where homes are most households' largest asset. This asset can form the basis for further wealth for funding businesses, paying for higher education, and helping children buy their first home. In fact, we find that when parents own a home, their children are more likely to be homeowners as young adults. Historically, however, in large part because of government policies, white families were helped into these benefits, while families of color were largely denied them. Today, some 75% of white households own homes, yet less than half of Black and Latinx households do. And the gaps in Boston are even starker. Compounding over generations, this has contributed to a striking wealth disparity. For every dollar held by the median white family nationally, the median Black family has about a dime. Moreover, we project that absent concerted efforts, the Black homeownership rate will continue to decline over the next 2 decades. What efforts can have the most impact? Well, the number one barrier cited by renters to homeownership is lack of assets to make a down payment and pay closing costs. We calculated about 235,000 mortgage-ready millennials of color living in the Boston area, in the MSA. This means they have the income and credit to potentially qualify, suggesting that down payment is a big missing piece. Many of these young adults of color cannot turn to their parents for help with the down payment. The median wealth of white young adults' parents nationally is $215,000, compared with less than $15,000 for the parents of Black young adults and less than $35,000 for the parents of Latinx young adults. So obviously that is not that does not leave a whole lot of room to help your kid with the down payment in Boston and have any cushion left yourself. Down payment assistance can break this cycle, especially if it is targeted to those who haven't had access to the intergenerational wealth building benefits of homeownership. I commend Maha and your city's work on down payment assistance programs. As far as we know, STASH is the first program to use first generation targeting for homeownership, an approach that has been adapted into proposals at the federal level. Nationally, using the STASH definition, where the homebuyer's parents didn't own a home, never owned a home while the child was growing up, we estimate there are about 2.5 million eligible likely participating households nationwide, earning less than 120% of area median income. Of those, we estimate a third are Black, 40% Latinx, and 20% white. But this definition may be hard to operationalize at a national scale, and our blog post, which I cite with this testimony, looked at some other options. Note that our research shows that only continuous home ownership by parents led to statistically higher home ownership for their children. In other words, parents having a late start to home ownership or intermittent episodes of home ownership does not have the same wealth building effect as sustained home ownership. Stash recognizes this in part by including people whose parents lost homes during the foreclosure crisis. Now, the standard definition of a first-time home buyer is someone who has not owned in the prior 3 years. Applying that definition to both the buyer and their parents gave us a larger potential pool, 4.37 million, 36% of whom are Black and 28% Latinx. Down payment assistance can help these households, as we have heard today, by putting homeownership within reach for people with less access to parental wealth. It also helps them become homeowners sooner, giving them more years for the wealth building effects to accrue. And it can make for a stronger borrower with a greater financial cushion, lower payments, more equity, and with homebuyer education, more knowledge. All this suggests that Stash is a big step in the right direction, and we are eager to learn from it. I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've been joined by Councilor Ricardo Arroyo. I don't know if you had anything to say, Councilor Arroyo.
I'll just keep it really short. Thank you, Madam Chair. I obviously, like a lot of folks, understand the importance of home ownership in establishing wealth. My family, when they first got to Boston, lived in Villa Victoria, which is affordable housing that they then used to buy their first home in Hyde Park in 1981, and it very much impacted the rest of my life, the rest of my siblings' lives, and the rest of their financial lives. And so this is an incredibly important issue of getting people their first home, getting them to be able to afford them and buy them here in Boston. And so I look forward to, I'm sorry I'm late for this, I am going to play it back, but I look forward to hearing from everybody about ways to ensure that more people are able to do that in the city. Thank you. And thank you to the makers for pushing this.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Up next is Ms. Joanne Barber.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I will be brief because much of what has been said is a part of what I would have said. I'm the executive director of Charles U Inc. We own, in partnership with the community builders, a 240-unit affordable housing development in Brighton, along with about 15,000 square feet of affordable retail space and a large community center that is available for the entire Allston-Brighton community. I'm going to just kind of set the stage for what we're up against. That really goes to what Maureen was talking about earlier and what Councilor Braden was talking about in terms of Allston-Brighton. Just in terms of the lack of affordability in Boston. In 2019, Boston Magazine reported that Boston was the 14th most expensive housing market in the country. So fast forward to May of 2021, and there's been a 14% increase in the median price of a single family home in Boston, rising to over $760,000. And that same time period between May 2020 and May 2021, there's been over a 10% increase in the price of condos to well over $630,000. So when we're looking at the prices that homes folks are able to afford in the $400 to $450 range, we are in deep trouble in terms of finding housing. And Zillow is predicting, according to the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, that those prices could increase by another 15% in 2022. So our housing market is just exploding and making it even more impossible for our households to enjoy this dream of home ownership. The second piece is that many of my families really want their community of choice. And in our case, it's the Allston-Brighton community. And as Councilor Braden alluded to, we have no housing opportunities in Allston-Brighton. And we are up against the needs of so many college students and their need for housing, that any housing that comes on the market is bought up by investors who can realize significant cash flow by renting to several students in each unit. So until and unless our university neighbors are willing to invest in affordable housing on their campuses, we're going to continue to lose that housing for families in our community. And in Allston Brighton, since 2010, according to the CDC's Rising Rents, Closing Doors report, our prices have gone up 70% for single family homes and nearly doubled for 2 and 3 family homes for folks in the community. So we are in a process where we are not able to create new housing in Allston Brighton. We don't have any land to create it. And we are in a situation where we are up against investors who are able to purchase the properties at high prices for families that are having that be their retirement, which certainly makes sense. So as this affordability gap continues, and we know that the production of truly affordable housing is not keeping pace, there's a little bit of a caution that I want to offer in here. The truly affordable housing that we are creating, much of it with IDP, is something that is certainly able to stabilize and assist families in terms of identifying other opportunities for investment. But I don't see it as a big wealth builder, and that's a part of what housing is about for our families. And that's in large part because of those deed restrictions. So for example, the Brighton Mills homeownership that was developed as a second phase of the Charles Hugh redevelopment in Brighton has a 3% increase cap for resale on those properties. So if, in the last couple of years, we've gone up 14%, folks that are able to sell homes at those increased values are gaining wealth. They're not gaining it when they are trying to resell, if they need to, their deed restricted units. And in many cases, they also have to have prior approval from the BPDA to make sure that they don't incur any kind of penalties. So we're not building true wealth, in my mind, unless we are able to find additional funding, which everybody's talked about, and I think is absolutely important, to create more of that middle affordability that Maureen Flynn was talking about, that families are looking for, that has more reasonable opportunities for people if they need to sell their property to gain wealth through that. So there has to be some middle ground in terms of realizing what those deed restriction amounts should be. And I think that has to happen at the same time that we are increasing the down payment assistance and closing cost assistance, so that hopefully families are getting at least 20% down payment, so they're not getting charged with PMI and other costs in their mortgages. So I would say those are the comments that I would want to make around this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Megan Monson and then Bruce Marks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, counselors, for allowing me to give testimony today. My name is Megan Monson, and I'm the Homeownership and Counseling Programs Manager at Allston Brighton CDC. We're a small community-based nonprofit with a focus on housing and providing services to the neighborhoods and residents of Allston Brighton. We offer regular first-time homebuyer classes that cover the process of purchasing a home in the state, as well as introduce the special programs that we've been talking about here today, such as 1+ Boston, One Mortgage, Mass Housing, Down Payment Assistance, and others. And upon the completion of the class, a participant receives a certificate that makes them eligible to apply for these affordable homeownership programs. So right now, the average list price for a condo in Allston and Brighton is $606,000. Assuming a household is debt-free, it takes an annual income of at least $135,000 to be able to afford this property. Most of the clients that I work with in homeownership counseling earn below $100,000 annually. So you see the mismatch there. They're not able to afford this median purchase price of the neighborhood. When I'm getting ready to meet with a client and I see an income of less than $60,000, I know it's going to be a really difficult conversation because with that level of income, it's nearly impossible for a household to purchase a property in the city. Yes, the One Plus Boston program has stepped in and alleviated a bit of this pressure by increasing the purchasing power of low-income households. But in Allston and Brighton, the bottom tier of market rate properties is usually a 300 square foot studio or a 500 square foot one bedroom unit, which is not something that families can purchase. And it takes another $100,000 of purchasing power to reach the lowest price 2-bedroom unit. In the last year, 43% of Home Buying 101 graduates indicated that they're a first-generation home buyer. They would be the first in their family to own their own home if they're successful navigating the process. Whatever assets they have, it's likely that they've created them themselves rather than received any help from prior generations. So they're starting off on different footing than those whose parents own their own home, and they need to be able to take advantage of much more robust assistance programs. So let me catch where did I end up here? So in the last year, most of the clients that I've worked with who have successfully bought in Boston have been able to do so because of the One Plus Boston program or the luck of winning an affordable housing lottery, sometimes both of those combined. Many other clients have decided to look outside the city and are no longer considering purchasing in Boston. So from my perspective, the current assistance programs we have for first-time homebuyers cannot keep up with the increasing market values in the city. So the example that I mentioned about working with clients that earn less than $60,000 a year and that level of income being virtually impossible to achieve what the market values are, that was the case really before the pandemic. Now I have the same difficult conversations with any household making up to and above $100,000 per year. That's because when these households get pre-approved and start shopping for a home, they have intense market competition to contend with. And we've heard about that competition from some of our other presenters today. These households do not have the kind of savings that they would need to make a competitive offer, one that offers well over the asking price. So if we as a city want to help disadvantaged but hopeful first-time home buyers, we need even more robust assistance programs. Before the pandemic, we were focused on making sure down payment and closing costs were not a barrier to homeownership, and some really creative and impactful solutions were established to do that. And I think now we need more creative and impactful solutions to significantly increase purchasing power so that more market rate properties are brought within the reach of low-income households. And I really appreciate the work that everyone has been doing on all housing fronts in the city and know that we have some brilliant minds working to solve these current issues. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. We're going next to Bruce Marks, the CEO and founder of NACA.
It's good to be here. It's good to see, Clark, that you have a senior moment so that I feel better to hear you when you testify on that. So I will follow your suit on that. So what I didn't hear today is about NACA and about what we do. So just a little bit of background. We started in Boston with the Hotel Workers Union here. We're the first to actually negotiate a housing trust fund, and we were the first to take on a large scale predatory lending. We actually coined the term predatory lending in our campaign in Dorchester on the second mortgage scam that was going on there in the late 1980s. NACA, and through its housing subsidiary, is the largest housing counseling agency in the country. We do 31% of all the counseling in the country, and out of 1,700 counseling agencies. In Boston, we've done over 1,700 closings in Boston, and we provide the best mortgage in this country. And so let's go through that in a second, because we've heard about this. So there's no government assistance as part of this. So we overcome the major roadblocks to affordable homeownership. Number one, the need for significant savings. The NACA solution, no down payment and no closing cost. So let me say that again. The bank requires no down payment and the bank pays all the closing costs. Secondly, restrictive underwriting. At NACA, we do character-based lending. What does that mean? That means we never consider the credit score. Never consider a credit score. We look at the payment history that someone makes over the last 12 to 24 months, and we exclude the payments that the late payments that they do not control. Meaning if someone has unaffordable medical bills, that's not a reflection of whether they're ready for home ownership. It just says we have a dysfunctional, unaffordable healthcare system. So, and we don't do risk-based price lending like every other lender does. So risk-based price lending is when you look at 3 criteria: credit score, debt-to-income ratio, and down payment, LTV. We don't consider that in our criteria. Compensating factor, character-based lending. Number 3, unaffordable terms. Everybody going through NACA, everybody gets no down payment and no closing cost. And today's rate at a below market fixed rate. Today's rate for a 30-year mortgage is 2%. 2%. For a 15-year mortgage, it is 1.25%. And then you can buy it down. So a lot of homeowners, get close to 0% interest rate. Last thing, to deal with racism and bias, we do comprehensive counseling, the most comprehensive out there in the country. So it's full document underwriting, full document counseling. So we verify with pay stubs, bank statements, W-2s, all those things to do that. So when someone is NACA qualified, they are basically pre-approved. So they become a desirable buyer for real estate agents, sellers, and lenders out there. So we have $20 billion of this one mortgage product, $20 billion from $15 billion from Bank of America, and our foreclosure rate is 0.0012. So we have demonstrated that if you do it the right way, you counsel the right way with the best mortgage in America, and that's not a point of view. That's factually the best mortgage in America, because we are also a licensed nonprofit mortgage broker out there. So when you look at that they have looked at that, and we put in all our materials, the best mortgage in America. So some of them push back and they say, how can you say
Mr. Marks, if I can just ask you to wrap it up because we want to get to questions.
Sure. So let me do that. So the one thing is, so you shouldn't be throwing away your money for down payment and closing costs. That's a waste of your money. The other thing is, I think there's a little too much what I've heard of what I consider a happy talk. If you're serious about doing affordable housing in the city of Boston, you should require the developers out there to do 30, and I say 50% of their units need to be affordable. If they say that they can't make it affordable because it's a 50% requirement, have them show you the developments. Have them show you their cost to do that, and then you can make the adjustments. But the fact that what I'm hearing now in this hearing, it's so few units, and it's so much money that you're throwing at it that you don't need to throw away, and you're accomplishing so very little out there. So you have to have a reality check out there and saying you got to do it on a much bigger scale to do that, whether you use NACA or you use others. And the last thing I'll say is to work with the city of Boston. Remember, we're in 50 states. It is one of the most difficult bureaucratic processes to make work. And it's really frustrating. We should do a lot more business in Boston. We get 500 to 1,000 people coming to our workshops every 2 weeks. In Boston, in the Boston area, it's just really difficult to deal with in city of Boston. And you need to have a reality check out there. And please, just stop the happy talk out there. You got to do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. All right, we're going to go now to councillor questions, and I'm taking over chairing as the vice chair of the committee, so I'll start and then go to my colleague, Councillor Braden. I guess question, Clark, Simone, Yannicka offered, some thoughts about ways in which we might adjust the first generation definition. Mr. Marks just shared some thoughts on things going forward. I guess one of the things that we're all talking about has come up a few times, and Maureen's brought it up, is the idea of putting some more funds in from our ARPA funds towards home ownership. It's something that the state's looking at doing, but that's also part of a city conversation. And I guess my question is sort of to get people's different perspectives here. And same thing, Shayok, if you want to say it on behalf of GBIO, where do you think the marginal additional dollar on home ownership needs to be spent, right? Like, is it a question of amping up one of the programs we've talked about today, a new dynamic of that? Like, what do you think is the place if you add an additional dollar, where you would put it? And maybe Clark, I happen to be staring at you in my screen, so I'll go to you.
Sure. A couple things. One is an interest rate reduction is by far the best bang for the buck. I think it's not. It certainly isn't simple to get. We've had with one mortgage a discount rate for everybody of at least 30 basis points below market rates, but going another full percentage point below that has been kind of a big lift with the banks. That the bang for the buck there is huge. The other thing I would respectfully disagree with Bruce about not spending money on down payment assistance. It's really less down payment assistance and more gap filler around the difference between what the buyers we're trying to serve can afford and what the market prices are of properties in the city of Boston. So a mortgage can't, if a buyer can only qualify for so much mortgage, and at some level, without filling that gap in some fashion, you're just putting most properties in the city out of reach of the buyers we're all trying to serve. So I would say in the first instance, interest rate buy downs are the most effective use of public money, but you really do need to fill the gap between the most that the borrower can borrow and what it costs to buy a property.
Great, thanks. Shayok or Simone, do either of you have thoughts on that?
I'll just share briefly that I think, GBI is doing some research on this, and we're trying to figure that answer out for ourselves. But I think, certainly putting money into 1+ mortgage and interest rate reduction is a big deal. And I also think that's something that will be felt by our people. And I think our but at the same time, obviously the supply of affordable housing and affordable homeownership opportunities needs to be expanded greatly. And there is so much money coming in. So we are really interested in also looking at those, how money could be spent in that direction as well. But yeah, we're sort of in active research mode to answer that question for ourselves. But I'll highlight those two pieces.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. So at the risk of sounding repetitive, I think we need both. We need the supply side and we need that buyer side, that assistance, because, especially for first-gen buyers, that is, as we've already talked about, there's no one for them to go to have that down payment and closing cost piece. And so having the city or any other funder kind of investing in that part to break that barrier down, along with having some place to buy, those two things combined will help to close that racial homeownership gap and get people into the homes that they need.
Great, thanks. And Maureen, I guess a question for you on this is I don't know if D&D yet has a sort of proposal. I guess, I find myself wondering, right? It was tossed around this idea of kind of trying to get to 1,000 new homeowners in Boston in 5 years. I don't think we've increased the supply, but I don't think we're on track for that right now. Or do you think we are? Or
yes.
I guess, okay, you think we are. Great. That's better still to hear.
We are on track for assisting 1,000 home buyers in that amount of time. through a combination of production and providing assistance to the home buyer. So yes, we're on track for that. And I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but I know we're on track because we track it all the time. And I would echo what others have said about the interest rate. We've been kind of told by the lenders that with One Plus Boston, we were getting the interest rate down to basically the cost of money, as they call it. So getting below 2% for them was getting like, whoa, they were like, oh, but we've had buyers buy, and Karen can confirm this, with like 1.75 interest rate. So getting to kind of their cost of money as low as we can go really it provides an exponential boost to the buying power that down payment alone can't do. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, just to add to that, one of the buyers, the one that I used in my example, that it was a Section 8 and it was able to buy a family, single mother, her interest rate was a 1.375. So it was really amazing that she was able to afford her single family home.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah. And I guess just a thing to say to D&D is that I would hope, and to the advocates, at MAHA and GBO is if we manage to get the state funding, whether it's $500 million or $1 billion for home ownership or whatever, that, continuing to think along the lines of One Plus Boston, which to me is about, there's statewide programs, but then there's the question of how do we keep families and especially enable families of color to buy in Boston. And I feel as though the One Plus Boston program is partly us looking at Clark's very good one mortgage program and saying, okay, but what do we need to really move extra to move the needle in Boston? And I guess that feels like the place where the city has the most capacity, because we're not going to have the same financial capacity as the state if the state goes all out, but thinking about, where can we kind of add value? I don't know.
Yeah, and for us, it's the helping the individual, like the buyer on the demand side, and then helping to make sure that we have that stock, so the affordable stock. And I know Joanne talked about some of the challenges with deed restricted properties, but so we like to balance it, right? So we need that affordable stock so that we always have it, so that it's not in perpetuity, but it's meant to that neighborhoods would be financially or in that way integrated long term. But we also helping the buyer, and our programs don't require, our buyer programs don't require a deed restriction, just a mortgage is really important. Someone from D&D texted me the update. We're 93% of our goal. We've assisted 572 buyers with homeownership as of July 31st. So.
Great. Awesome. And then my last question before I go to Councilor Braden for Yannicka, and I really appreciate you joining us. It's one of the pleasures of Zoom hearings is that we can invite folks from all over and not just people who can make their way down to City Hall physically. But I just wonder if you could give us a little bit more sense, because, how to kind of how to amplify in a sort of research-based, impactful way this first generation stuff. Because I think we're very proud of the fact that we really do think that this idea is kind of originated from Boston, and that it's a good way of, within the confines of protected classes and fair housing law, of really addressing the fact that, of course, our racial wealth gap and our homeownership imbalance was a race-conscious policy in the sense of being a racist set of policies. And then, that really it's pretty hard to reform that without some kind of race-conscious targeting. And so I think a lot of credit to MAHA for kind of thinking outside the box on that front. Obviously, it would be a huge boon to us as people who have kind of gotten this thing rolling if the federal government would, invest in it and support it and expand it. And we would, of course, hope to benefit from that. And so I guess just, I hear you on the point that you made about, there might be ways to shift the definition a little bit so that somebody whose parents had a very intermittent experience of home ownership are not excluded here. And I think that's something we can take back and talk about. Are there things we should be doing or focusing on, or advocacy, or sort of trying to study like in evaluation with what we're funding here in Boston in order to amplify this nationwide? Any thoughts on that?
Well, as a researcher, I'm always going to applaud anybody's interest in doing evaluations or, learning from what you're doing, as it is really groundbreaking. And I think there is a lot to be learned here. I can say that the federal proposal, in addition to looking at a slightly more expansive definition of first generation home buyer, they're also looking at larger amounts. I think the proposed amount in one case, for example, is $20,000 down payment assistance and maybe even more in high cost areas. And they are, I'm not sure what the income limits are for the MAHA program, I'm sorry, but I think the federal proposals are looking at something at 120% of area median income, or perhaps even higher. Because I think when they realize when they're getting at that first generation swath, they can, there's history that has prevented people, despite their income and despite their efforts to become homeowners and to pass that generational wealth on. Related to intergenerational wealth, the other barriers are credit score and income and opportunity and education kind of bundled together. To me, those feel a lot like they're related to intergenerational and racially based opportunities. And so, those are key barriers in the underwriting process. So those might be something else. And I think we've heard some things today about how programs are trying to overcome those, but those continue to bear looking at. And I think, everybody's right. There's no one silver bullet. Down payment assistance alone is not going to solve this problem. I'll draw your attention to the Black Homeownership Collaborative, which is a national effort that has a 7-point plan for getting to 3 million net new Black homeowners by 2030. And so in order to do that, you have to think about access and education and outreach. You have to think about down payment assistance. You have to include lending standards. You have to also think about supply, absolutely. And then also, it's not enough to just put people in homes. You have to help them stay there. And so the way you service loans is important to all this, all undergirded by civil and consumer rights and fair housing and fair lending. So I'm sorry I can't give you the one silver bullet answer that you may be looking for. I do believe that targeting and thinking very closely about whether you're leveling the playing field or kind of conferring further advantage to already advantaged people is a very important first step to take in designing these programs.
Absolutely. No, I think that's so important. And that's why I really appreciate the department for bringing some of the data today for us. And I think that as we think about interventions that we could make with additional funds, whether they're, additional things appropriated at the federal level, ARPA funds through the state, ARPA funds through the city, that like really asking, with the marginal dollar, what's impactful and who are we serving and how is it helping us close that gap is so important. Because I think often about the fact, I am not a homeowner. When I become a homeowner, I will be a first-time home buyer, but that will be in the context of a family that's owned homes for many generations, right? And that's just such a different situation than what we're really trying to move the needle on here. So I'm glad that we're sort of zoning in on that greater level of specificity. Councillor Braden, thanks for co-sponsoring. You want to get to your questions?
Thank you. I think the one thing we struggle with in this neighborhood in Allston Brighton is the difficulty in supply. Like when we do get housing, we're building, 10,000 units of housing out here, Joanne, and it's most of it's rental, and most of it's small units. So I don't know in terms of, is there any way we can mandate that a certain proportion of the housing has to offer home ownership? Like I don't know. I don't know what tools we have in the kit in terms of incentivizing developers to build more home ownership or to support some of our nonprofit developers to develop some more home ownership. Again, we don't have land to build on except for one very large landowner out here who owns a lot of land. But that's the challenge we have out here. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on what we might do about that. Supply is a huge issue. It's more of a statement than a comment, but if anyone has any thoughts, I'd be glad to hear them.
Anyone want to jump in on the supply question? Yeah, Joanne.
Yeah, actually, more of a question in terms of, and this goes to Megan's point too, that is having the right type of inventory that's family-friendly inventory. And I'm just curious about, in terms of what Maureen and Karen and Megan, what you might be seeing as well, in terms of what the requests are for some of those larger family units. I know for my families that have watched 90 Antwerp Street go up, and there's some units with 3 bedrooms, and they're like, oh, I wish it was 4 because I need 4 kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if there's any kind of data around what how much of a match or mismatch we have with the inventory that's out there.
I'm not sure. I don't think we have any data about that's hard data about mismatch. I know, just to go a little bit to your question and then to Council Braden's question, on the production side, for many years now, the city's been on its own in terms of funding homeownership units on the production side. So the state hasn't been in the game for many, many years. They're getting back in the game with the Commonwealth Builder Program. And because they're getting back in the game, that will increase our resources to build, because up to this point, it's been only city resources. So now we also have the availability of ARPA funds, right? So that takes us in an exponential way to help do more production. We're trying to think of creative ways to do production. So it's not just new construction, but what can we do with not NOAA, the CDC, but naturally occurring affordable housing? So our AOP program that provides about $100,000 per unit for small developers and nonprofits to purchase off the private market and to make those long-term affordable. So we're thinking of those ways, like what's out there already that we can purchase that we might not have to build from the ground and convert into homeownership or make homeownership long-term. So we're looking at all of those ways, but I think the additional resources from the state and now the federal resources will really begin to expand, not to use Maha's term, but expand the pie even more than we could ever have done with city resources on its own. But I don't know if Karen, if you have anecdotal information about our buyers and whether they're asking for larger units. I know we're producing them in our NHI program. So we produce singles and 2 families through NHI. 2 families are very expensive to build, but we do, and those are large units, sometimes 2 and 3 bedrooms. But Karen, I don't know if anecdotally, if you've seen an increased demand for larger more bedroom unit, you know what I mean, more larger bedrooms, more bedroom size. What you're seeing.
So the demand is there and the need is there. It's not, I mean, right now it's just the pricing market. It's so high that they're not able to afford. So what we're seeing is that larger families are moving out of Boston because they cannot afford it, but there is a need. There is a need. We hear it every day. Just so you guys know, we took over 290 applications. We processed over 290 applications last year for the One Plus Boston program. And a lot of those applications, we did multiple for singles, condos, and 2s and 3 families. And our chart will show that we're seeing more condos being purchased because that's what people can afford. But there is a need to get larger units, larger room size, I suffered that. My own family. I did it. I mean, just last year, like I had to luckily I own my house and I had to go to the city and expand and need the permit to expand my own property because I was having the same need. My family grew up, my kids grew up. So there is really a very demand and on that part. So we've seen the need on that. And we hear it every day with our constituents too.
Yeah.
Just to benchmark this a little bit, with One Plus Boston today, market rate single family homes, the average is 468,000. And that's the low end. That is literally the low end of the market. So I think, that's really the problem here, is that the properties that are in that, in that category just way out of reach.
And our buyers are competing with cash offers from folks who come in with $800, $900, $1 million and buy a 2-family home for cash. So it's a really difficult challenge. But here we are. We're going to keep going at this. Madam Chair, I know there's other folks waiting to make comments, so I will not ask any further questions at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Councilor Braden. And I did just actually have a quick follow-up on that to Maureen and to Clark. I just wonder, in terms of the mechanics of the program, like how much do we see with that cash offer reference, for instance, like it's just gotten so crazy that I wonder, like, do we see sellers who are resistant to selling to home buyers who have these 2 approval letters, right? Like both, both the regular mortgage letter and then the city will gap fill. Like, do we require presumably our buyers need a mortgage contingency. And I don't know if we're requiring an inspection contingency. I know that currently in the market in Boston, it's gotten so overheated that it's quite common to have sellers demanding functionally that people waive both of those. So I'm sort of curious about on this, like how much people are getting boxed out just by those kinds of elements. And then maybe if you could also, as a slightly separate question, but sort of, there was a reference to the fact that we started with 3 lenders on One Plus Boston, we've gone to 6, but I think we have considerably more on the one mortgage program. Is that right, Clark? So just, what the challenges are for getting and keeping lenders in the program and whether that's also been a constraint to growing it.
So in terms of our buyers, especially One Plus buyers being turned away because of cash offers, yes, that's a problem. And Simone can speak to that as well. We're talking about that and trying to figure out a creative solution to that. But yes, that's absolutely a problem. We've done a lot of education, as has MAHA and other homebuyer counseling agencies, on educating realtors, and we're talking to them all the time so that because they're the key, right? If they're not behind the buyer using One Plus or one of our other programs, it's not going to happen, right? So realtors are absolutely key to making the deal happen. And so we're educating them all the time. We hold sessions for them. MAHA's held sessions for them. We've participated so that they can get familiar with the mechanics of the program. I don't think from what I've heard, and Simone and others can provide more feedback on this. I don't think folks are turned away by the 2 letters, the first, the main lender's letter and ours. Once we, the same realtors kind of work with first-time home buyers in the city of Boston. It's kind of a small group, and they're used to that 2-letter format. But the cash buyer going up against them is a problem. So I would say it's that's the reality. I don't know if Clark or Simone, if you have other things.
Not to the chair, not other things, but to just agree with you that most times the complaint is around the fact that they are not, their offers are not being accepted because the speculators walk in with cash, sometimes with a briefcase of cash.
Yeah.
Into it. You see one home on sale and you walk in and there's like 150, literally, no exaggeration, people looking at this, and most of them are investors. Mm-hmm. So it is around educating our seller brokers about how to maintain home ownership within the community instead of selling it to investors that are going to either use it for Airbnb or whatever and is not there to help to preserve our community. That I think maybe is something that we could think about, starting to implement some kind of different training classes for our realtors. But the actual letters, once the realtors understand the process as it relates to the buying power that comes with those 2 letters and stuff, I see minimal, if any, pushback on that front.
One quick thing I'd add, we had conversations with the city going back, 2+ years now about using buyer brokers to sort of short circuit the cash buyers. And we in the city have funded a broker at Maha to sort of test that. And I think the idea, if we could come up with a financing vehicle to sort of basically beat the cash buyers at their own game, if there were a way to do that and then have pre-qualified buyers able to step in, that would be great. And it's complicated, and that's the reason we didn't do it right away when we started talking about it. But I think we have sort of fighting fire with fire. I think we can find a way to compete with the cash buyers for the kind of good homeowners we want to see in the city. That's really worth pursuing.
Yeah, I really hope we can come up with some solutions because, especially out here, and I think Mission Hill also reflects this, that because there's a demand for rentals, speculative investors come in and with cash, and we end up with a whole neighborhood that's absentee landlords, and everything goes downhill from there. So we want to see folks living in their homes and being part of our community here. So Thank you.
Yannicka, did you want to get in on this?
Well, obviously, you probably know that you're not alone here. I mean, we've seen it's sort of related, but we have seen evidence that sellers are not even willing to entertain offers from FHA borrowers. So, FHA borrowers need not make an offer. And so this trend is certainly being experienced. It's not unique to your program here. Something that I don't have any specific proposals for you all to consider, but there have people have been kicking around ideas around maybe incentives for sellers to sell to owner occupants.
Yeah, and I wondered, since Megan's on, if you could speak to, I have a recollection that there was a program with Allston Brighton CDC, and that was funded partly as part of mitigation with Harvard around kind of the idea of you guys buying properties and then sort of being the ones who are holding them, and then you're reselling them. And I think this might relate to Clark's suggestion. I mean, to me, it certainly strikes me that if the city could just be, the city or some publicly funded intermediary entity, whatever, could just be like grabbing things with cash offers and then reselling them back to, these pre-qualified folks who are trying to support, that would be a very good thing for us to do. So I just wonder, Megan, if you could speak at all to the Allston Brighton experience with that. I think it involved attaching an owner occupancy deed restriction to the properties, if I recall.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. So basically, and I will admit I don't understand the financing aspect of it, but how it plays out is the Allston Brighton CDC purchases properties in the lower Allston area. So the part of Allston that's above Interstate 90, below the river. And so we basically, there's some work to do beforehand, because we have to let sellers know about the program. It's not that we're purchasing the homes with cash and that's why they want to sell to us. It's that they are wanting to make a lasting impact in the community, and they find out about the program and realize that whoever ends up with their home will be an owner occupant. And so it's usually people who have lived there for a long time. They really care about the preservation of the community. And they want to see someone living in their home that actually owns it and not turned into any of these absentee landlord situations that we see. And so we make them an offer that's based on the market value of the property. And then we turn it around and sell it to someone who plans to occupy it as their primary residence. And it does come with the deed restriction that you mentioned. So it's not an affordable homeownership program, but it is an owner occupancy program that cuts out competition from investors.
Got it. Thanks. And yes, no, that's helpful. So it's not that you're competing on the cash side. So there's still a kind of there's a kind of value community proposition that you're making to people, which is important. And I think could be a piece of talking to our realtor community about being better. But I also think like at some point, we also just need to have market incentives that help drive people. Clark, were you going to say something about?
Nope. No, I'm good.
I guess I just wonder why it's so complicated for us to just have a pool of cash and buy. I mean, it's a revolving fund, basically, right?
Yeah, I think it's more about you. If there's no inspection, it's sort of there's a certain level of risk that you need to sort of mitigate for the borrower. There's some things that make it a little bit more complicated, but I think it's a solvable problem, honestly, with some effort. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to drop. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. And I'm actually about to draw this to a conclusion because we've got a few people waiting for public testimony, and it is past 2 hours. So we're really grateful for everyone's time. Yeah, I'll just say, we really, I think what we wanted to do today was highlight all of these programs and the really good work that so many of the folks on the call are doing, and then and get into some of these weeds very much in the expectation that this is going to continue in the year ahead, both to be in a space of opportunity because of the potential funding sources available and a huge crunch for our communities, right? And just like a huge uphill battle that we're fighting, and that it behooves us to have as clear of a sense as we can about like what we're up against and what we're up to and how we can strengthen those things. And so just really grateful for everybody's time today, whether it's the city folks at D&D, MAHA, GBIO, NACA, ABCDC, you don't really use that, Alston Brighton CDC. And I'm afraid I've left somebody out, but of course, Craig from MHP. And then Yannicka, thank you so much again for joining us and giving us that wider perspective. We are the originators of many great ideas in Boston, but that occasionally makes us slightly parochial as well. So it's good to remember that there is a land beyond the city. So yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you especially to my co-sponsors, Councillor Braden and Councillor Edwards, our chair. And so I will now go, I think I've got a couple more folks from NACA who are gonna give public testimony, and we'll go into Josh Wilson and then to Jill Konopka. And then we will finish this out. If anybody is watching at home and you would like to testify, please shoot an email relatively quickly to ron.cobb, that's Ron Cobb, at boston.gov. So ron.cobb at boston.gov, and we can add you to the queue. But otherwise, we're going to hear from Josh and then hear from Jill, and then we'll be concluding the hearing. So Mr. Josh Wilson, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to just share and be with you in this long but important meeting. Thank you, Chair and councilors, for making time for this conversation. So I'm a resident. I live here in Dorchester. I'm a pastor in the community, and I'm a recent first-time homebuyer through the NACA program. And we've talked a lot about, and there are others here who know a lot more about the data, the statistics on kind of the soaring cost of homeownership here in our city. My wife and I have been kind of part of the folks trying to navigate that. We are middle income. She works in a social enterprise focused on homeownership. I'm a pastor of a multiracial community here in Dorchester, and our income put us kind of in the awkward position of making too much to qualify for the vast majority of programs, but not enough to actually be able to kind of compete in the market. And over the last couple of years, we had a really good rental situation here in Dorchester. But there was a lot of stress kind of hovering in the water. We knew that our situation was temporary. Rents could and certainly eventually would go up. And we didn't really have enough room to start a family, which was something we were hoping to do. So our housing situation was definitely a constant source of stress for us. And for us, just moving out or going further afield didn't feel like an option. I'm a former Main Streets organizer here in Dorchester, pastor of a church community that's deeply rooted here in the neighborhood. And so for us, like many of our neighbors, living here doesn't feel just nice. It's not just a luxury. It felt essential. This was our home. We're embedded in this place and with these people. And yet, as we were looking at our finances, the escalating rent prices, it didn't seem possible to reconcile kind of living here without switching careers or abandoning our dreams of a family. And it was right in the midst of this tension that friends began to introduce us to some of the programs that we've discussed today. We did some counseling with Maha and got to know them a little bit. Eventually, we got pointed to NACA because they were able to support us specifically based on kind of our income being just above the limits of some of the programs that were available through MACA. I'm a pastor, so I'll tell you that I think that NACA was actually like a godsend for us. The program definitely changed the game. We still weren't able to compete with some of these cash offers. We got outbid repeatedly by contractors who were coming in and wanted to renovate things and turn things into condos. But the lack of PMI, the lack of closing costs, the ability to have a 2% interest rate gave us some buying power that hadn't been possible before. And not everybody was interested in kind of our unique mortgage situation, but eventually with a lot of prayers, some referrals, a letter saying, hey, we're nice people, all the things, we ended up closing on a home here in kind of the Bowdoin Geneva neighborhood of Dorchester, just about a 10-minute walk from where we had lived already. And what that's kind of opened up for us is the ability to, have fixed housing costs. We now still don't have enough room for me to take a call without the possibility of my kids screaming in the background. But it's enough space. As Councilor Braden mentioned earlier, it's the two-family route where we're able to kind of supplement our mortgage, keep our costs relatively low. And honestly, because we were able to use some of these programs, we were also able to keep the rent for our downstairs tenant at below market, same rent that he's been paying for years as he's lived in this building for close to a decade. Our situation is a success story, and I'm so grateful for NACA, for Maha, for some of these other programs that are doing so much to create opportunities like this. And I want to celebrate that and also just immediately say that, it's what's there is not nearly enough. Councilor Edwards earlier mentioned that this is a racial justice issue, a moral issue. I couldn't agree more. I have the privilege of being in this church community that's multiracial, and when we look around, it's impossible not to notice that the folk who own are white and the people of color are renters. And so I do think that this is a necessary, a pressing issue. So many people are still being left behind and left out. These neighbors, these friends, they deserve some of these opportunities that have been afforded to me and to my wife. So there's a lot of experts on this call who have better ideas than me about exactly which programs and how best to do those things. For us, those lower interest rates, the closing costs all played a part of that. But just want to encourage and affirm and celebrate the work that's going on, and also just request that more funding, more priority be placed on these programs, especially things that are allowing people of color and folks who already live in the neighborhood to access some of these homeownership opportunities that are so essential for equity and opportunity. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. And now I've got Jill, and I've been having trouble, Ron, moving Jill over. So if you can try moving her into panelists, that would be great. All right. I think we may have just lost Jill. Okay, I think we may have lost Jill, but I'll just say for her and for also anybody who's watching this at home or later or whatever, that if you email ron, ron.cobb@boston.gov, so ron.cobb@boston.gov, we continue to collect written testimony for this hearing. So we'd be happy to have any written comments that people have. And as I said, I think this is going to be a very live, continuing conversation. Yeah. It was gratifying to have Maureen kind of rattle off the things that we've done in the last year on the cooperative housing front, because, we had a hearing not unlike this in the sense of talking about, what are the things we could be doing, what are the things we are doing. And the city made a bunch of innovations in its programs in response to that over the last year. So, I think with homeownership, we've been highlighting today that we've really taken a lot of steps lately, but there's a lot of amping up and fine tuning that we can still do. So thank you all. And I just realized I've been caught without my gavel, but
can't believe you don't have your gavel.
It's here. I just didn't have it. Now I have it. Now I'm good.
Now she's got it.
So without further ado, and with thanks again to everybody, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on Housing and Community Development is now adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.